Okay, hi everyone. We're going to get started. My name is Valerie Piro. I'm the social media manager for Cabinet Pro Software. This is Steve. He's on mute right now, but he's gonna. I'm going to introduce him. He's going to be our guest speaker today for this awesome webinar called "How to Run a Successful Shop." We hope that you get a lot out of it, and what we're going to start with some instructions on just the webinar. All right, so you will all be muted. We can't hear or see you. You're muted for the duration of the webinar. So if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A. I believe it's at the bottom of your screen. You'll see Q&A. Type your question in there. They'll be answered throughout the presentation. Eliana and Frank are also here. They will be kind of in the background and helping moderate the Q&A. So just type your questions throughout the presentation, and they'll be either answered throughout the presentation, either verbally by Steve, or you can look in the Q&A to read the answer. At the end, we'll kind of make sure that all questions are wrapped up and answered. The webinar is being recorded right now. It will be posted to Cabinet Pro, and it'll also be sent in an email through a link. Okay. So let's get started. So Steve Elias is our guest speaker today. He has been a Cabinet Pro customer for a little over 3 years. He is the co-owner of Sunvalley Cabinets and Construction. It's a custom middle to high-end build-to-order cabinet shop in Manitoba, Canada. They work directly with homeowners as well as with several contractors. The business was started by Steve's father 38 years ago, and it was a two-person shop until the boys took over about 13 years ago. There are now 8 people working in the cabinet division of the company, including Steve and his 2 brothers. So Steve, he wears several hats when he's at work. He takes care of design, sales, ordering, and creation of the CNC and shop files. So he is very knowledgeable, and he can kind of go into more of his experience in the presentation. So I'm going to hand it over to him, and okay, go ahead, Steve.
All right, thank you. So we'll start off with why I chose a career in cabinetry. So we'll go right back to what Valerie just said. My father started the business 38 years ago, which is, well, that's a handful of years before I was even born. And so ever since I've been in diapers, I've kind of been in the shop with my dad growing up. I always called myself the gopher. I would be helping him wherever I could, with whatever I could. And actually, I think I've learned a lot from him. So anyways, let's jump to when I was in high school. I was spending every evening and weekend basically doing some type of work in relation to my dad's company. And my older brother was also starting with the company at the time. So there we were, the 2 of us working in the cabinet shop. So then being young and ambitious and wanting to see the company grow, it hadn't really grown the cabinet company or the cabinet division of the company in quite a number of years. So we wanted to eventually take over. So we decided that we would stick around and kind of make a career out of it. And so we were in construction as well as cabinetry. My dad went more into the into the construction, and my brothers did strictly cabinetry. Let's go to the next slide, please, Valerie. So let's go to the next slide. Here we go. So it's going to about the 10-year mark for myself, which would have been, I guess, 2010. At that point, it was myself and my brother John. We were working in the shop and getting really crowded. We at that time had about 2,000 square foot shop. We were always busy, and we decided that the only way that we could grow the company was to get some more space. So we did an addition then of about 5,000 square feet, and added an employee, and made some upgrades throughout the shop. We got our own finishing booth, and really things were going good. And want to point out here, the top line of the slide, or the note here, is that every turning point or milestone was a reaction to something that we needed. So wasn't really the best way of doing business at the time. We were always kind of like one move behind. Something was really needed. We didn't really have much of a vision. We were just kind of going one day at a time. So this would now be 3 years ago. We decided that what we had in the shop, we kind of had peaked out. There was no more room for growth, and we needed to look at other options as what could make our shop more efficient, given the space that we had. Adding space is always very expensive, so we were exploring other options. And let's go to the next slide. So here we were in, I believe it was 2017 or 16. We needed to find a way to make our space more productive, and also be more efficient overall, like have a higher year-end profit, have a better experience end-to-end. So we decided that we could either add on again, get more space, and not really change anything in the shop, just keep doing the same methods over and over, and that doesn't really solve any efficiency problems. It simply would have allowed our production to be higher. And we decided that wasn't necessarily the best step to go. There was always room for improvement in one area or another. So we started looking at better equipment, rearranging things in the shop, and we decided that rather than adding more panel saws or anything like that, we would look at getting a CNC router. And at the same time, we were looking at how to cut waste, improve efficiencies in other ways, and that was the first time that we started looking at any type of a cabinet-related software. We had design software, but we had nothing that could really help us on the shop floor. So back at this time, we knew nothing about cabinet software at all, and it was actually a bit of a scary thing to even start exploring it. And we tried a few. We did trials of a handful, and nothing was quite exactly what we were looking for, and which is kind of an odd thing to say, seeing how we didn't really know what we were looking for. So we did a ton of research and more research, and one day we stumbled across Cabinet Pro. So let's go to the next slide. So during this research phase, I guess, we were looking at, well, we'll start with the CNC router. So first off, we were considering things like budget, where is their parts when there's a breakdown. There will be a breakdown, it doesn't matter what machine you have, one day you'll have a breakdown. Availability of service technicians, reliability, features, efficiencies, and how will it meet the needs 10 years from now. And all of these things we took into account very seriously. And the main reason was that myself still being quite young at the time, our father was still involved. And for those of you that have ever worked with a parent, probably realize that parents are not always that easily convinced when you want to go and spend $150,000. So we did our math very, very carefully on this. And when me and my brother presented this to our dad, he actually was, I think he was kind of impressed with the legwork we had put in at this point. We crunched the numbers and spent probably hundreds of hours on places like WoodWeb and Woodworking Network and so forth, just reading people's opinions and asking questions and lots of phone calls. And at this point, we projected that we would have a 7-year payoff period for our machine, and not really having taken software into consideration at this point. And last note there is the floor space. So we, like I was saying, we were already a little bit crowded on space. We had around 7,000 square foot at the time. I think we were 5 employees, but the problem was always room. It seems like anytime when a company is busy, probably goes for any type of work, if you're really busy, somehow you just always end up short on space. So that's where we were at. We had decided on which CNC router we were going to go. We ended up with the SA, and with a projected 7-year payback. Let's go to the next slide. So then the part that we had initially kind of overlooked, not forgotten about, just not spent as much time with, was the software. And you'll see I have 2 notes there written there twice. Remember, your CNC router cannot cut what your software cannot make. And I put it on there twice because that is incredibly important. It doesn't matter how fancy of a piece of equipment you have, if you don't know how to tell it what to do, it really doesn't help you a lot. So this is the part where we tried 2 cabinet softwares or CNC softwares, and thankfully we could do just short trials of them and didn't invest a lot of money. And there was too many things that that the softwares were unable to do, or in the other case it was that some types of costs were too extreme and we couldn't justify spending that type of money. And then we came across Cabinet Pro, and I still remember that day, the first time I ever was on Cabinet Pro's website, and I got I guess they call it a test drive, I think, where Frank came on, or I went onto Frank's machine remotely, and he was showing me a variety of things that it was capable of doing. And I think the test drive is supposed to be like an hour demo or something like that, but I still remember we started this at like 3:30 in the afternoon, and I think we were still going at around 7 o'clock in the evening. And that right there was that was a major thing for me there. There was a lot of features that I saw there that were exactly what we were after. In a shop like ours, we can't really have, or we basically have to have the option of modifying any individual part. We're a custom shop. That's all we do. Every job is different, and there's a variety of different methods that we use. So with this particular software, it was really beneficial. And also the ability to add more features. Like as the years gone by, now it's 3 years, I think we've had dozens of enhancements that have been added to the software just for our shop. And that's been much appreciated, and they haven't come with a cost. So if there's something the software needs and it's a good idea, odds are it's going to be added. Along with Cabinet Pro, we found that the tech support was very good. You work with Frank, who is also the one that's been writing the software for many, many years. He knows that software like the back of his hand, so that there is no concern whatsoever about tech support. And major thing, will it meet the needs 10 years from now? And well, we're 3 years in and we haven't seen a shortfall yet. So I would like to say it will. As with how cabinetry world works, everything changes every couple of days. Someone's got a new idea or wants something new, and software changes forever as well. So I would imagine there will be indefinite updates, enhancements, and that's, I think it will be exactly what we need 10 years from now as well. That being said, once a company gets really, really good and you become a massive, like 100 employee company, yeah, then there's softwares that are made just for that. But for where we are, being less than 10 employees, it is exactly what we need. And for us, a big thing, working with our father early on, he a bit old school. He does not like to lease or rent anything. So the fact that we had a purchase option with Cabinet Pro rather than doing indefinite rental payments or lease payments, whatever you want to call it, that's been great as well. So I don't even know exactly what it was at the time when we purchased it. We purchased it in Canadian dollars, so that's like almost twice of the American dollars. And so anyways, we dished out like 12 grand for the software at the time. And if we had been doing it with leases the way that a lot of the other companies were set up, we would be, after 4 or 5 years, we were basically throwing away extra cash. So the fact that you can do a purchase option, that was a big plus for us. Let's go to the next slide. So once it came down to getting the router in our shop, getting it set up, and getting the software set up, for those of you that don't have any of that yet, this was very daunting for us at the time. Like, my recommendation is, if you're going to tackle this, get the software before you have your router, because there's a lot of setup you can do before your router is actually in place. Get the software streamlined, and that's something that Frank was very available for us for setting this up, and we were on the phone a lot of the time as well. So don't expect it to be just a walk in the park. You're going to spend hours and hours setting this up. I think I had somewhere around 50, 60 hours that we used to set up, or basically to teach the software how we build. That would probably be the best way to put it, because the software is capable of building any way you like, but you still have to get the information from your head into the software. So that took quite a period of time, but we got it right. And how long will it take to kind of cover that? Once you think you've got it right, you're going to cut a bunch of test stuff, and then you're going to make tweaks. And after, I think it was a month or a month and a half of on and off adjustments, and now we don't really ever touch any of the main settings in the software. We just use it. And at first, I was very afraid of trusting anything. When you start a job and you're cutting up 100 sheets of plywood or anything like that, that's a lot of dollars of material. You have a little bit of butterflies in your stomach as to if those are actually going to be good or not. So we never had any major screw-ups, so that's been a blessing, I guess. And our payback period, earlier I mentioned that we were kind of thinking of a 7-year payback. We're 3 years in and we're almost done our payback. So based on the increased capacity and production that we've had. So basically our $150,000 CNC investment and our $12,000 Cabinet Pro investment, yeah, we're paying that off a lot faster than we anticipated. And we're finding that because of the precision that comes with going the CNC route with Cabinet Pro, as well as the waste reduction and all of those things, they add up to just having a much more efficient shot. As an example, I did this yesterday just so I would know this for today. We had a job recently where we used about 100 sheets of material with a wood grain direction on it. So you obviously have to be grain direction oriented when you're planning your sheets, right? So I did the math on it, on what it would have taken for if we were cutting this on a panel saw where you're always doing through cuts and so forth. It was going to take 110 sheets with a panel saw route, and then I did it with the Cabinet Pro with its optimization ability that it has. We reduced the sheet count by 15%, and that's a lot of money when you're looking at $50, $60 per sheet that you're cutting up. That's big savings, and those are savings that your competition doesn't necessarily have. So should also point out that with that route, on this large job, we had a waste percentage of only 7%, which is really, really low. And those are percentages that we would just never have been close to prior to having a CNC router and Cabinet Pro to run it. That being said, we're going to go back up a little bit to our panel saw days. When we were still doing everything on a panel saw, everything was through cuts. At that time, we had we basically made an Excel program to make our cutlass for us, and it worked, but it was relatively time consuming. So for those of you that are looking at doing Cabinet Pro and you don't have a router, you're just doing a panel saw, it has very good features for that as well, especially the optimization ability that it has for panel saws where you will still always have through cuts. But I've never used this part, I've just seen demos of it. It's definitely worth your time though to invest in Cabinet Pro, even if you're not doing a router. And you never know, you're probably going to grow into it. So at this point, having had it now for 3 years, it's been interesting to watch what has all changed. So what we've done, we went into I went through our hour records. We keep track of all of our staff on every job they've done for years already. And and we break jobs into different tasks. So let's say we have a job where you have cutting, then you have edge banding, then you have, let's say you break it up into assembly or drawer assembly, whatever you do. We found that we were spending about 25% less time per job. And so I looked for jobs that were virtually identical so I could use those hour comparisons. And yeah, so we were saving, but 1/4 of our labor was being saved by going with a router. And we were getting a better precise product as well. Up here in Manitoba, our climate is kind of difficult for woodworking. So you see I have noted here much more precise product. So what I mean by that is when we deal with very cold temperatures in the wintertime and humidities of only like 10%, but then once we have July, August, we can have humidities of 85% and plus 30 Celsius. So the humidity was a very big problem using panel saws because there are lots of blades being pinched as you're cutting and so forth. With the router, all of those problems have been solved. So overall, things are more square, things are more consistent. Panel processing, our shop, we cut most every part of the cabinet is cut on the CNC router, including parts like the drawer boxes. And so drawer boxes, there's more machining on them, so they typically drag out the cutting period. But we average about 7 sheets per hour, and that's with every single hole, dado, every single hole or anything that needs to be on that cabinet has been made. So that's for the drawer slides, hinges, side mount hardware, so that, for example, some Rev-A-Shelf pullouts and all those things. I've set that all up. So when the cabinet leaves the router and goes through the assembly phase, there is not a single hole being made that is not already there. So that's been good for is it's made the assembly so easy that we can put more of our newer staff on that and then put our more experienced guys into areas of making face frames or anything that's maybe a little bit more complicated, or range hood covers, anything that's where you want the experienced woodworker involved with. So as your shop grows, staffing is always a problem. So having those locations for the newer staff, that's been really good. Virtually 0 part remakes. So back in the panel saw days, there was a lot of issues like just parts not being 100% square, or just personal errors as they're cutting or dadoing anything. Now, when we do jobs, it's very rare that we have more than 1/3% remakes. And if there is a remake now, it's probably from parts that were scratched somewhere along the line of handling them. We have basically 0 parts move on our router when we're cutting them. We have good vacuum on our table, but more importantly, Cabinet Pro has very good flexible parameters you can set for when parts will get onion skinned or tabbed or what you name it. So when we first started off with Cabinet Pro, a lot of those features weren't there. And then as we went along, they have been added as we've requested things. So to have almost no remakes, that's incredibly handy. Like I can't imagine even going back to the days of not having the router. Just overall, the things that have changed in our shop because of it, that's been incredible. Less material waste. We've been joking in the shop for a while already that our dumpster, we may as well sell it because it takes so long to fill it up now. So compared to the panel saw days to now, I haven't kept track of it, but it must be thousands of dollars that we've saved because of the reduced waste. Cabinet Pro will also track your material remnants. So anytime you're left off with parts that are over a certain size, you can ask it to cut it out, and then it'll library them so you can use those up down the road. So that's been helpful as well. We don't do that with the cheaper materials, such as just a plain old white melamine. But once you get to the plywoods and other materials like that, where you're paying $50, $60, $70 a sheet, that's very much worth the time to set that up. And then kind of by accident, last year we started picking up cutting jobs for a neighboring cabinet shop. They're not even really our competition. They work about an hour and a half away from us, but they were one day looking for a shop to start doing their design and cut work for them, and they stumbled across us. And well, anytime you can be cutting for another shop, it's really very easy money. I believe we charge somewhere around 150 bucks an hour for all of their cutting, and that has been very, very good for us. Let's go to the next slide. So I want to stress these things a little bit, because these are all things that 5 years ago we didn't have time for, and I know we big time needed it. For your business, you need to have a clear vision. Earlier I was saying that everything we ever did was a reaction to some type of a problem. We no longer operate that way. Now we actually have time, or I have time, to work on the business and not just always kind of be behind the 8 ball, chasing after every fire that we have. So now we have a plan for what's coming up down the road for us. We know what our growth steps are going to be. We know what type of jobs we like, what type of jobs we don't like, where the profits are best. All of those things, you need to actually sit down and think about it. Now that we do that, our margins have increased considerably. So also know what you want from your business. I'm assuming the majority of you guys that are listening are business owners or shareholders. Or one thing that someone locally once told me, it was a retired businessman. He once told me that after all these years of being self-employed and working crazy hours, he retired and realized that he had never really accomplished what he had set out to do. And often I find myself having been too busy at work to really realize, am I getting ahead or not, or does this even make sense? Am I better off with an 8 to 5 job where I can go home from work and forget about work till the next morning? So know what you want, know what you're sacrificing, and then set up in such a way that you still have your life away from work, which 5 years ago I didn't have. Now I have it, and that's been great. Understand your finances and know your margins. Several years ago, when we were still taking every job that we could get, because that's just how we operate. You want everything you can get, so if the next guy doesn't get the job, and we would just work an immense amount of hours and be over busy all the time. And then one day when I think it was actually over a winter break, I sat down and did the numbers to determine what types of projects are we making the most money on, what types of projects do we want our business to be known for. So what I mean by that is, did we want to do more commercial work where it's typically mostly pre-finished materials such as melamines or thermofoil wrap, or do we want to do more painted and stained and lacquered wood type of projects? And it really wasn't too hard to figure that out. We wanted the higher end, the painted, stained projects, because the more material we can put through, our margins are just better, and we're not just profiting off of labor, we're selling more product. And by doing that, I reverse engineered all of our numbers. So me and my brothers that are involved with the company, we basically sat down to decide what do we want from our business? Like how much money do we hope to make now? How much money do we hope to make in 10 years? And when do we want to retire? I'm only in the low 30s, but sometimes you already think of retiring after that day. But I plan on retiring in my early 60s. So we need to make X number of dollars every year to make that happen. And so while we reverse engineered our numbers and we were thinking about how much money we wanted to make, how much we wanted to work, we came across something that was actually very surprising. Rather than having the approach of trying to earn every job all the time, we've become a lot more fussy as the jobs will accept. And even by turning away certain jobs, first few times we did that, we were kind of scared. Well, what's this going to do to our business? Are we going to be sweeping the floor 3 times a day because we're too slow? And that actually never was the case. All that ever changed for us is that by being selective, the business reputation has actually gotten better, because people have become to know, or in the area are now know us as, that's the shop that can do this for you, rather than that's the shop that'll do anything you ask. So basically we've come into a little bit more of a niche market for the nicer quality products, and shied away more from the stuff that, or the customers that are also looking at an IKEA or a Home Depot or some kind of lower cost prefab thing. So really it's increased our business, and we did it while raising costs. So number one, we got more selective to go into the jobs that make us more money. Number two, we actually raised our costs. And the two examples I have beneath here, something I put together because I think a lot of you might be surprised by it. So example one is, if your business makes $2 million a year, or sells $2 million a year, and you spent 1.8 million to sell that 2 million, you only profited 10%. But if you raised 5%, your sales can actually decline by 1/3, and your profit margins stay identical. Or sorry, your year-end profit stays identical. So I think most people don't realize that such a small increase can make such a big difference. So we did exactly that. Those numbers were actually pretty close to what we were doing a couple of years ago. And by doing that, we freed up more time. We no longer schedule ourselves to work so many hours, because we can work a little bit less, earn just as much money, and life is less stressful. You can enjoy a lot more of life, and we can be with our family and kids at home. So example two is the same thing, just smaller scale, and then a slightly larger increase. That's where we were at probably 10 years ago. We would be doing $500,000 a year, and we didn't make a lot of money. And that's back from in my dad's time of the company. We were content, right? No one was looking to make a lot of money, because at the time, well, we were right out of high school. Let's go to the next slide. So in your spare time, I would recommend exactly this. This is something we do a couple times a year. We look at how to make things more efficient. We're basically at peak in our shop again, as far as capacity goes. So with the 7,000 square feet and the router, we're basically maxed out. Space is the biggest problem again, and that is because when you start to do 50, 60 kitchens or projects a year, scheduling becomes a major nightmare. So often we're kind of building a couple weeks in advance, and that means we've accumulated a good amount of product in the shop. So we're actually in the middle of a pretty extensive renovation, or sorry, addition, and we're actually just over doubling our shop space. So that will become more warehouse and storage of completed projects, so that the rest of our shop can become more efficient. And one thing we did a few years ago was when myself and my brother no longer really had the ability to be doing the majority of the work, we wrote down and made a bunch of procedures for the shop. So as our staff would be learning and taking over more of the roles that we'd been doing in the past, we had these operating procedures ready for them. They didn't need to bother us for them. They just knew how to do each job. So that's very important. If your business is growing, you can't have the mindset anymore of being the one that's doing all of those things just because you always have been. So often for myself, that's been hard, because there were certain things I was quite fond of and attached to, but at the end of the day, I just can't do everything, so I had to delegate. So you have to have those operating procedures at some point. And yeah, research materials, methods, equipment, software. What's your competition doing? So yeah, I'll spend a lot of evenings or weekends just browsing online to see what's new, what's coming. As far as trends go, we do our own designs, so I try to stay quite on top of what's out there. And then equipment, that's more my brother's job, but we're always looking at staying current with our equipment. Just a few months ago, we got a new edge bander, and that's because in our area there's been quite a demand for some high gloss acrylic stuff, and even though that material is quite a pain to work with, if people want it, we got to produce it. So we got an edge bander that's capable of doing a good job with that. And software, just last week I was spending a lot of time researching, scheduling software, and I purchased some of that now as well. So what that's going to do for us is it's going to identify all the bottlenecks in our shop as far as each area of the shop. I can see 3-4 weeks in advance that this department of the shop's going to be actually over capacity. So those are the ones that we need to help out, or maybe ask to work a Saturday or whatever the case may be. And it also schedules other trades on job sites. So we do some general contracting as well. So for that reason, that's been very helpful. And then very important for me is know what your competition is doing. So I don't like to ever be told that by a customer that, oh, this and this supplier can make this for me, but why aren't you offering that? So we tend to be very on top of what everybody is capable of doing. And streamline your processes. So a while ago, we made a point of watching what's going on in the shop and finding every bottleneck, so, or every area where we're being wasteful. So we actually did something kind of interesting. We're basically stand in the corner and watch people work for an hour and just take note of how often are they going to, let's say, get something from a workbench, or how often are they going to get a hinge or a drawer slide or whatever, and just relocating things in your shop to cut down on wasted time. Actually, I know of one place where they actually tied a string onto each employee's belt loop who was at a workstation, and tied them onto the workstation, and then every time they needed to get something throughout the day that was out of reach from their desk or their workstation, they had to note down what it was, and then they decided to move all of those items permanently to their stations. And they did the calculations on how many steps a day it would save or whatever it was, and it seems a bit odd to do that, but yet at the same time, down the road, like think of the savings that there might be. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, sorry, I messed up a little bit. Let's go 2 slides earlier. I want to touch on something in there again. Here. So what we've done now with that, we've actually paid attention to our finances more as far as which projects are most profitable. I mentioned that we focused more on ones that we were painting and staining and so forth. We now, in the area, anytime, like even real estate agents or whatever, they're picking up on this too, that as people are buying homes and such, and they want to replace kitchens, and customer mentions to them, oh, I want to replace this kitchen, this house that we want to buy, we want this and this. And we have a lot of real estate agents even that have become aware of what we're good at, what our focus is, and we're getting tons of referrals in that way. And so once you focus more on certain things rather than being the shop that does everything, that actually can really improve your business. Valerie, did we want to open it up to some question and answers, or?
We can do that. We have the Q&A. I don't see any questions in there right now. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and type it in to the Q&A and we can answer them. But other than that, let's see. I think you did a great job, Steve. You had some really great examples, and I like the idea of niching down to really be specific, and then you can really meet your customers' needs. I thought that string to the workstation was a brilliant idea. Very creative.
Yeah, I would like to try that in our shop, and I think it would actually be quite funny. But
yeah, I was like, oh. I thought like they would have to cut the string and tie another one and then count how many strings they had or something.
Yeah, no, that actually is a good idea. But what we've over the years, we've rearranged our shop many times just to avoid on those extra steps, because every time you can save 30 seconds, but if you save 30 seconds 20 times throughout the day and then 200 times a year, all of a sudden you've saved a bundle of money. So
yeah, for sure. It definitely adds up, and just little things like that you don't always think about, for sure. Okay, well, I don't see any questions. We do have a video of Steve's shop, but if you are a customer and you're part of our customer only group on Facebook, he posted a more lengthy video showing his whole shop and showroom and all of that. So you can head there to see that. If you're not a customer and a Cabinet Pro customer, then you want to learn more about Cabinet Pro and how we can specifically meet your shop's needs. It might be different from Steve. You might not be at that level yet, or you're just thinking about a CNC. Give us a call, schedule a test drive, just like Steve was talking about that first time he came across Cabinet Pro, and he had that test drive for several hours. I don't think that's an everyday thing for Frank, but yes, he is very dedicated to answering all of your questions to make sure.
Frank might still have nightmares about that day. I'm not pretty sure. I did grill him pretty good, and he seemed to have answers for almost everything, so that part was pretty good.
He's very knowledgeable.
I still remember from that test drive there was one item, I don't remember what it was, but there was one item that couldn't be for us. And he called me the next morning, and he had added it to the program. I hadn't purchased anything at that time, but when there was that kind of willingness to make a change just for my shop, that was a big bonus to going with your software.
Yeah, for sure. If it's a good idea, then he's going to implement it, and he's quick too.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But anyways, you can give us a call. Our number is 702-330-0775. You can also go on to cabinetpro.com. There under the demonstration tab, you can see all sorts of videos are categorized to show you some of the features of Cabinet Pro. And you can follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And let's see, I'm seeing. Okay, we have a question, Steve, from Zia.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna go ahead and read it. It says, we already have a CNC router and purchased Cabinet Pro, which is extremely helpful. The only problem we are having is assembly. So we are looking at the lock dowel system. What are your thoughts on that? Because we manufacture PVC cabinets, which is water resistant and termite resistant.
Well, I saw that Frank had added the lock dowel system. It's not something that we're using, but the system does look really good. I've seen these are those plastic dowels that, if I'm right, they're like kind of an oval shape or whatever they are. I've seen them, I've held them, and they had a really good display at the KBIS show a couple of years ago. And anyways, it looks really good, but I couldn't really share much about it other than that it looks very simple. We are using a blind dado system, so be very different construction method.
Yep, and so yeah, it's hard with the custom cabinetry business and software because everyone is going to be a little bit different. So.
Well, yeah, and I think you guys, the way your software is, you could be doing a lock dowel, a butt joint, or dowels, or it's endless. You can do any method you can dream of, as far as I know. So.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Any other questions before I can show Steve's video? Just so you can get a visual of his shop. Okay, and that is a very impressive video.
I did not make it.
Yeah, that is a very pretty shop. Um, so I just want to thank you again, Steve, for putting in all this effort, for sharing with us. You have very successful shop and it looks beautiful. I love all of your designs. I get to see them all on social media, so it makes me want to redo my whole house.
Well,
So,
I'll have to come and do that in the winter time because it's too
yeah.
cold here anyway. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. Bye, Steve.
Yeah, see you, Valerie. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.